Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
Impressions that record the edentulous ridge contours, peripheries, and extensions, separately from the anatomic impression of the teeth, will enhance the stability and retention of distal extension appliances and reduce the stresses to the remaining teeth. After the framework with its temporary bases is inserted, the occlusal rests are examined for proper seating. The bases are checked, and any peripheral overextensions are removed. The occlusion is examined, and any interferences caused by either the framework or bases are eliminated. Interference between the tuberosity and the distal extremities of the extension base should be noted and removed. Final inspection of the occlusion can be accomplished by using 28-gauge wax. The tissue contacting surface of the temporary base must be relieved to allow adequate room for the impression wax. A thickness of 1 to 1.5 millimeters of wax is desirable to permit proper flow. Two types of waxes are used in this impression technique. The whitish pink wafer is Kerr number 1 wax, which exhibits no flow at mouth temperature and is used for tray extension and support. The yellow or orange-colored wax is Kerr number 4 and is the impression wax. This wax is melted and conditioned in a water bath type heater and is applied to the temporary base or the impression tray in a fluid state. An adequate buildup of wax is achieved to bring the wax surface into contact with the underlying ridge structure. A minimum thickness of wax is placed in the ridge crest. A heavier application is made around the tray periphery. This distribution will allow the wax to flow in two directions, toward the ridge crest and toward the base periphery. The framework with the temporary bases carrying the impression wax is inserted. Firm seating pressure is exerted on the occlusal rests and indirect retainers to completely seat the appliance. The impression wax has optimum flow properties at mouth temperature. With the appliance seated, the border structures are flexed slightly to give an indication of peripheral extension. The impression is removed, air-dried, and inspected. Where the wax has made intimate contact with the underlying soft tissues, the surface will exhibit a high sheen. Areas that are not in contact or not in a supporting relationship will retain a frosted appearance. Wax is now applied to the frosted portions of the impression. The impression is taken to the mouth and only partially seated for a short period to permit the wax to approach mouth temperature before seating pressure is firmly applied. As soon as all of the stress-bearing area of the impression has been recorded and it exhibits a glossy surface finish, the peripheral extension and border trim can be established. Wax additions are made to the peripheries. The patient's chin should be supported during heavy occlusal loading to minimize injury to the mandibular joint complex. Referral molding requires patient participation, such as wide opening, swallowing, strong pressure with the tongue against the anterior portion of the framework, and strong tongue thrust over the bases and into the buccal vestibule to mold the lingual flanges. The operator can manually flex the patient's cheeks to record the peripheral extension and contour of the buccal flanges. During all movements, the appliance should be maintained in a firmly seated position. If the retentive clasps have been opened slightly, the insertion and removal of the appliance with the wax impression can be readily accomplished. The soft tissue exercises should determine the exact extent and thickness of the flange border. Any tray interferences to the proper molding of the wax should be removed. A sharp scalpel is used to remove the impression wax from the resin surface to facilitate tray reduction. If the soft impression wax extends more than 1 millimeter beyond the borders of the underlying tray, peripheral control is lost. Furthermore, the unsupported impression wax is subject to distortion. Therefore, a more rigid wax is used to support the extension into the buccal and lingual peripheries. The first addition of supporting wax is made with a very hot spatula to assure that the wax bonds to the temporary base and to the impression wax. This layer of wax is then chilled, and further additions of the hard wax can be accomplished from the wax conditioner with the brush. If any portion of this hard wax should escape and flow onto the border of the impression wax, it must be removed. The high melting point and stiffness of number 1 Kerr's impression wax are such that often it can be used alone as a temporary base material. Following the support and extension of the tray, another application of the impression wax is made to the peripheries. The impression is returned to the mouth for final contouring. Extreme care must be exercised at this point in the procedure to avoid contact with the opposing teeth, heavy pressure against ridge structures, or distortion from contact with the tongue. Maximum seating pressure is now applied to the occlusal rests to ensure the recording of the edentulous ridge contour with the abutment teeth in their functional relationship within the alveolus. The patient is encouraged to perform the necessary exercises to his maximum capacity to avoid possible overextension in any area of the base. The completed impression should demonstrate a continuous, smooth, molded peripheral border. The entire stress-bearing surface should exhibit a glossy, smooth finish. The impression is stored so that no pressure can be exerted on peripheral extensions. Once the impression of the edentulous ridge has been properly registered, a curing cast is made to record this new ridge form. Artificial stone is placed into the impression, being careful not to distort the wax surface or to entrap air between the wax surface and the investing stone. A curing cast will simplify subsequent clinical procedures. This is especially desirable when the occlusion opposing the distal extension partial denture has remaining natural teeth. When the appliance is opposed with a maxillary complete denture, a modified master cast procedure is more effective. A mound of stone is then placed on a glass slab, and the framework with the ridge impression is placed into this mix. Care must be observed to prevent the stone mix from sagging away from the impression surface. The investing stone is carefully worked around the impression borders to record the proper extension and thickness of the impression. All areas of the framework, minor connectors and clasp units, must be freed of any investing stone so that the framework with the temporary bases can readily be removed from the curing cast following setting. The proper water-powder ratio and proper mixing will assure adequate working time of this investing stone. A key is formed on the anterior portion of the curing cast to provide an accurate relationship with the opposing unit when this cast is placed in the articulator. All areas of the framework are freed from the investing stone. Adequate support is maintained at the distal portion or heels of the cast so that later, during processing procedures, fracture can be avoided. Following proper setting of the stone mix, the cast is then trimmed and a surface bevel is placed on the base periphery as a key for later mounting. The curing cast with the framework and the temporary bases is placed in a warm water bath to soften the impression wax and to allow easy removal of the appliance from the cast. Any wax remnants that remain on the cast surface can then be floated free in a hot water bath.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.